Laura, I think we lost you on the my.
I know I'm here. I lost my computer just crashed. I'm trying to get back on so my face shows, but I don't.
It's okay. As long as you can
Yeah.
hear us, that's the most important thing.
I'm here. Yeah.
Which is good. So, the other thing I wanted to see if I could do was record with the, and I'll figure it out next time. So there's a way to record with video too. Right now the recording is just a picture of my screen. It's not our faces, which is fine. But I think in the future I'll figure that out so it's a little more dynamic. Anyway, so the one question I got from everyone so far was, am I going to give you feedback on your project Framework 1? Yes, I am. I will get that to you guys by the end of the day. Any other questions? The other question Laura had was, is there a way to set up audio recording or video recording when you do your interviews? If you all want to try to use what we're using, GoToMeeting, I can help you do that. Just let me know and I'll set up a time outside of our teleconference session to talk more about that and train you so that you'll be able to use it. And it'll probably be that you have to schedule it within my time availability as well, because it is a little quirky and I want to make sure that it launches the way you need it to, so we can talk more about that offline. Any other questions specific to week 3 assignments? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to jump into our discussion, which this is one of my favorite theorists that is discussed in this section is Erik Erikson. Have any of you heard of Erik Erikson before our readings for this week?
Yeah, I just got out of psychology 101 class, so like all this is kind of review, and it's cool because our teacher told us we weren't really going to get able to until the lifespan, so I'm happy I'm able to now.
Yeah, good. So that name resonates. It's familiar to you. What is going on? There we go. I was trying to see your faces and I couldn't get the screen to pop up. So yeah, he is one of my favorites because his theories just make sense. When I read a lot of these theories, it's like, okay, yeah, I can understand it. But with Erikson, it really struck me because I can remember going through some of these stages myself, like literally. And then with my kids, it's even more resonant now because I see my kids going through these stages, and I witness it, and I think that that's what makes Erikson's theories so relatable, is the fact that you can picture yourself in these scenarios. So what I wanted to do to kind of grasp what your understanding of some of these phases and stages are is starting with the trust versus mistrust stage. Just let's talk about that attachment. What do you think is present in order for a baby to become attached to their parent? What do you think?
Love.
Love? Some people say that the attachment comes with feeding. What do you think? What do you say to that? That anybody that feeds a baby will grow that attachment because they're feeding the baby. They're feeding the child. Do you think that that's it, or is it more than that?
I think it relates to the touch, like, you know, feeling the warmth against someone and kind of like hearing them talk to you, and then the feeding also plays into it because you like have to hold them so close when they're so young that bottle feed even.
Right. And what is the relationship between that touch, that feel, from what the babies were used to before they left the womb? Think about that connection. Think about the significance of why parents swaddle their babies. Why do we do that? Why is the touch so important?
Because when they were in their entire life and in the womb, they were like so, I can't think of the word, but they were very going on.
You're getting there. I know you're trying to say what I'm thinking. Samantha, what were you going to say?
I was thinking that since they're inside the room the whole time, you know, they're kind of in that cradle position, and that's probably the reason why we...
Yeah. I mean, think about it. They're physically, that everything about where they are in the womb is comforting. It's surrounded by touch because they're constantly being comforted within the womb. So that's one of the theories of why swaddling is an effective method of helping babies to be soothed, because you're wrapping them to that feeling of what it felt like in the womb. So I think it's more than just feeding. I think you're right. I think you guys are onto something. And there was an experiment done, and I can't recall the psychologist who did it. It'll come to me a little. I think it's Harlow, where he set up an experiment where he had baby monkeys, and their mama was this metal kind of creature. It was just like a robotic, just a thing. It wasn't human. It had no feeling to it, but it would feed them. It would feed the babies. So the baby monkeys would go to it to get fed. Well, they decided that they would set up another experiment with the same construction of this monkey mama, metal monkey mama, right? Except this one was softer, and it had like blankets wrapped around it and cushioning and warmth to it, right? The monkeys with that mom attached to the monkey, the robotic monkey a lot better because of that soothing, soft touch, the feel, the comfort that came from that experience, versus the one that just gave them food. They didn't coddle or cuddle on the mama that just gave them food, but the one that was warmer and comforting, they did. They bonded and found a sense of attachment. So what do you think would happen to a child that their mom was going through post-traumatic or postpartum depression? What kind of attachment might form there?
Attachment disorder.
Attachment disorder?
Mm-hmm. Wouldn't that be separate attachment, or what's the one where they want to attach but they can't attach, and so when the mom does leave the room and she comes back, like they fight her but they also want her?
Yeah,
what's that?
Their mom, because they see their mom, right, and they feel their mom's presence, but their mom's presence isn't there because she has this negative feeling towards the child, and that's why postpartum depression it's a very serious problem that a lot of moms deal with, and it's because they want to be there, but they can't psychologically be there for their child, so that attachment has a really difficult time taking place. There's mistrust from the child, because the child recognizes that, and because the child recognizes that, it makes it really, really difficult for them to adequately attach to their parents. And it's that first stage of Erikson's theory. It's trust versus mistrust. If that attachment doesn't take place at that sense, right there, in that first stage of life, Erikson's theory states that they will forever, through their lifespan, have issues with trust. They will have issues with attachment because they're not able to have anything to model that from early in their life. But there's also a caveat to this, because just because a few of you, and not everyone on the line, but a few of you on the line were adopted. So maybe that trust didn't happen with your biological parents, but does that mean that it can't happen with another parent? What are your thoughts? Do you think it has to be that biological parent, or can that trust be built with someone else in your life? What do you think?
Can I talk? I think it can be somebody else, but I think age plays a big factor, that if it's done early enough, you have a lot of hope. I think it's harder as a baby gets older to gain ground that could be lost, and to overcome those obstacles are even harder.
Absolutely. Not to say that they can't, right, but the cards are kind of stacked against you.
Harder.
Yeah, it gets harder as you get older. And a lot of that is because now you've moved to a different stage, if you go by Erikson's theory. You're no longer in that basic trust versus mistrust stage. maybe you're now a 3-year-old and you're still in the foster care system, and now you're in a stage where you're trying to figure out your level of autonomy and independence. This is that stage where kids are like, no, I could do it myself. You know, that phase. Well, when the kids are in that stage, you know, they're in a different process of their life. So it is more difficult, like Laura is saying. They're at a different phase, so it's more difficult to build those attachment and that trust because they're older and they've experienced the world and they understand it in the way that they've experienced it. So I agree, Laura. Things get more and more difficult in terms of trust versus mistrust as time goes on. And some people don't get through these phases, and that constantly is going to be a challenge that follows them. What about the initiative versus guilt phase? What are your thoughts on that one? Taking initiative versus feeling guilty because you can't do it. Feeling like you should be able to do something, but you can't. You need to depend on others. This is about 3 or 4-year-olds. This is when they get to this phase. What do you think about that stage?
I'm a 3-year-old. She's turning 4 soon, and she went through this kind of like this time in her life when she said that when my dad asked her to do something, she said she couldn't do it. Like, for instance, doing like a simple task, she said she couldn't do it. Like, she always told herself that she couldn't, but my dad said that she could. So
exactly.
She kind of hope that she could actually do something on herself by herself.
Right. It's almost at that stage where they think that they can, but they also don't want to give up on parents doing the extra things for them. So they're kind of in between, and sometimes they're all proactive and they're like, yeah, I got this. I'm going to put on my own shoes. I'm going to put on my own shoes and no one's going to help me put on my shoes. But then on the flip side, you see the kids at this age where they're like, no, I can't do it. And you're like, you just did it yesterday. What do you mean you can't do it? My son always does this. He was always asking me to get him drinks, and I'm like, you could get yourself a drink. Here's where your cups are. Put the cup up against the water in the refrigerator and push, and you get water, right? He's totally competent of getting himself some water. But in his eyes, sometimes it's maybe mom can do it for me. And he's struggling with that phase of, do I want to do it by myself and take the initiative, or should I have mommy do it for me? And that's what they're battling with at that age. They're trying to figure out their way, you know? And it continues on, and we're going to continue to watch Erickson's stages unfold as we get to the next stages of the lifespan. But for me, his theory is the one that really makes a lot of sense. I like that we started talking a little bit, Brittany kind of jumped ahead. I was going to get into attachment a little bit more. But what she was talking about was the different forms of attachment. And there's 3 different types. There's secure, there's avoidant, and then there's resistant. And the resistance actually changed names over the course of the past couple of decades, where it used to be kind of this inconsistent, we couldn't really put them in a category because some would act one way, some would act another way. But now they've kind of categorized that all as resistant. But what are your thoughts on attachment? What do you think about kids that you've experienced in your life? Do you have any examples that you can draw from as in terms of a child that wasn't secure in their attachment? Have you ever seen that in action? What it looks like?
I did. With my niece, last year her mom went training in English, and her dad was working in another town, and she was not even 1 or like 6 months old. So, but my parents and I, we watched her. It was mostly me. She got really attached to me, and she started like calling me mom, and I would tell her, no, auntie. And it was just like that, and I think she got a little more attached to me than she did when her parents first came back.
Yeah, and you'll see some of that kind of that attachment carry on to other caregivers. Even at schools, there's some kids that'll be more attached to certain daycare providers than others. and they'll have a harder time in that transition when mom leaves based on maybe that person's not there. So it could go beyond the primary caregivers and have attachment styles that are depicted with secondary caregivers as well. So I think that's a good point that you brought up, that it's not necessarily only the primary caregiver you see this. But has anyone ever seen a baby not really, at this age, not really care at all when their parents leave?
My niece, or not my niece, but I was thinking about my niece, but my little sister, she's adopted into my family, and we had her for a while. She still has our last name, and she still comes over, like she's frequently comes over, so she spends probably 50% of the time here and 50% of the time at her birth mother's house, her biological. And some days when she comes over, she spends like a couple days here, and when she finally wants to go back, or when we take her back to her mother's house, she doesn't want to go back. She wants to spend more time with us.
Yeah. So it's interesting to me that for secure attachment, it's not necessarily that the child is completely torn when their parents leave. It's that they recognize it, that their parents are leaving. They show that they miss them, and they are excited when the parent is reunited. Whereas with a child that's resistant, they're consistently upset the whole time the parent's gone. And they're really difficult to soothe, and they can't, it's back to that trust versus mistrust. They don't think mom and dad are going to come back, and they're mad that mom left, or dad left, or whoever is their primary caregiver left. So resistant children are the ones that are really, it makes it really difficult for them going on into the next stages of development, because they never ever get that trust. They never get that secure attachment. So they question everybody in their life. What do you think that the results of that would be when it comes to romantic relationships later in life? Do you think there would be a kind of correlation between this at all? And this is just kind of a discussion question. I don't know if there's any relationship.
I was just thinking about that commercial that they have out, where it's usually there's this girl and the guy keeps texting her. And it's really, he's like really controlling and really self-conscious, and he can't let her go out because he thinks she's constantly going to cheat on him, and she's just kind of like attached in her own way too.
What kind of a baby do you think she was in terms of attachment, or he, whichever one is the one doing the texting?
He was the resistant, because he, in the same way, like he hates it when she's gone, but he wants her, but he's like always back and forth. You never know like which way he's gonna go.
Yeah, there actually is there are some research studies about this, and when you think about careers in human development and family studies, and there's a lot of research opportunities to look at this in greater detail. If this is interesting to you, think about that as that perspective, because there are researchers out there interested in this very topic. When we look at people in their romantic relationships, when we look at the extremely high divorce rates in our country, when we look at all of these factors of adulthood, does it really relate back to those earliest experiences and the level of attachment that took place as babies? I think an interesting study would be looking at kids that were in the foster care system and what their relationships look like at this level, because a lot of them felt like they had no attachment because they bounced from place to place most of their lives. So the research component of some of these things is quite interesting to consider. So that was one thing I wanted to talk about. And I don't know. I don't really know if there is a correlation. Some studies say there are, some studies say there isn't. Have any of you ever heard of the Adverse Childhood Experiences research, the ACEs research? No? So there's a lot of research going on nationally right now about adverse childhood experiences, when a child goes through traumatic experiences in their childhood, it is proven in a lot of these research studies to show that they're at risk for a lot of difficulties in their adulthood because of these. But there's also these things called resilience factors, that even if they had trauma during their childhood, if they had this resilience factors during their teenage years and early adulthood and were able to overcome some of those trauma, that they could still wind up having a successful outlook on life in the long term. So there's a lot of research in Alaska, especially on this, that's going on, is how can we create more resilience factors for these children that are going through these traumatic experiences to buffer them against that trauma, to provide them with a better outcome in the long term. That's another thing. It's all related to some of these early developmental theories that we're talking about in the text this week, from attachment to trust to all of those types of factors. So I definitely wanted to talk about that. Let's see. So we did Erickson. My next point that I wanted to talk to a little bit was the difference between what the role of moms and dads. And a lot of this goes to gender stereotyping, which is another concept that was talked about in great detail in the text this week. And what are your thoughts on that, about gender roles, about what moms should be doing versus dads, parenting, gender roles in play, gender roles in schools? I think this is a huge topic right now in our modern culture when it comes to the rights of transgendered people. It's a huge discussion item right now about, I know there's a huge thing going on right now with bathroom facilities and who should be able to use what restrooms based on if they're transgendered or not. What are your thoughts? Do you think that gender is a fluid thing, or do you think it's male or female and that's it? What do you think? There's no right or wrong answer to these things. I really just want your thoughts because it's a huge topic when it comes to raising kids at this age. Is it something that's learned? Is it innate? Is it something that they learn from their parents? Can the media and what's going on in modern day society influence these factors in kids? Or is it just something that is part of who you are? What do you think?
I'm watching my siblings right now, so that's why I'm not in front of the camera. But
Okay.
I'm going to say my entire first year of college was a lot of talking about this.
Uh-huh.
And I can understand why the gender roles were there before, because before, like, the women had to stay inside while the men were, like, doing very subsistence lifestyle, like in Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
Now I don't think it is a fluid thing because there's none of this, like, you have to be outside and people don't have to have, like, all these kids because there's not low survival rate.
Uh-huh.
And it's kind of frustrating because women are trying to go into the workforce and they are trying to, like, be a mom and, like, a worker, but society doesn't want them to, and that's, like, kind of relates to the lower wages and the acceptance of, like, men who want to be more feminine. And I kind of, like, even I recognize that before, like, I've seen my younger cousins playing with dolls, and I'm like, I'd be like, oh, they can't do that, that's really bad. But now I'm like, that's just them trying to, like, learn how to be a parent as well, and, that's a skill that they can take. So it's been a lot of learning this year in my freshman year of college was around that.
So it's what I'm hearing from you is it's almost generational, that you learned from your parents that boys shouldn't play with doll. This is me too. My mom and dad, if they would see my son playing with a doll, they'd be mad. They would say, what are you doing letting him do that? He's not allowed to do that. And like you, I said, well, he's pretending to be a daddy. There's nothing wrong with that. He wants to see what it's like to be a dad. So it's generational, and a lot of it comes from education. She's saying in my first year of college, this was a big thing that I've really learned and grown and discovered and understood my own understanding about it. I think it is generational. I think that there's a lot of core beliefs about the role of a mom versus the role of a dad. And I think that it's changing. It's something that's transforming over time. I don't think that it's the same way it was back in the day, or so they say.
Someone keeps saying, she's like, I think within 10 years the idea of gender is going to be so different. Like, it's just going to be so much more fluid and not so strict and we're not unrespectful, but not like accepting.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree. But I feel like there's a lot of people that we have to recognize there are strong feelings both ways. There's very traditional beliefs in what a male role is versus a female role, what boys should be playing versus girls. In my own family, I always wanted to play sports, and it wasn't until I was in high school and I said, I don't care, Mom and Dad, what you say, I'm going to play sports, that I actually did. You're a really good example, Brittany. You're a wrestler. There you go, right in and of that. No wonder you're talking about it so much. It's everything that you are like a visual representation right now of a lot of these discussions. Because 20 years ago, it would be unfathomed to have a female wrestling team. Because it was a boy sport.
There's still countries like that too.
Yeah. Exactly. I know when I played field hockey in high school, we had a boy on our team, and it was, why is this boy playing field hockey with a bunch of girls? It was just, everybody had something to say about it, and it was, well, he liked to play field hockey, and there was no field hockey team for boys. So he was on our team. It wasn't, we didn't look at it weird, but, oh, did the community look at it in this way? I mean, the grief that poor guy took for this was just crazy. But now more and more guys are playing field hockey on girls' teams, and they're not girls' teams anymore. It's more fluid. It's being looked at as just a sport and not a girl versus a boy type of a thing. And I agree. I think Brittany's onto something. I think things are going to look a lot different in the next 20 years than they do now. We're kind of at the brink of these things shifting. But I will recognize that there are some innate gender roles. I mean, I never told my son that he had to love superheroes and play with action figures and fight and wrestle and do these things. I never told my daughter that she had to play princess and like all things related to, puppies and ponies. But they naturally have gone towards those types of things. Even though both sets of toys are available, she's playing with this and he's playing with that. So there's natural, biological types of things going on here too. And I think that this is part of that huge debate that we talked about in the beginning. Nature versus nurture. How much of this is the environment, the culture, the society that we live in? And how much of this is just innate? How much of this is just part of who we are? Right? So it's something that we're going to continue to touch upon throughout all of these discussions on lifespan development, because there's no right answer. It's a blend of both of these things. But I think in what Brittany said that I gravitate towards is things are shifting in terms of acceptance, no matter what a person decides they want to be as themselves. And this is going to go into our discussion, I think it's not this week, the following week, on identity. When we start talking about, and 3 of you, I'm pretty much set in who I am as a person in my age, in my 30s. I'm sure Laura has a really strong sense of identity because she's older than us. You 3 are in a stage of your life right now where you're figuring it out. You're in the prime of identity exploration. And I think there's parts of our identity that we continue to develop over time. But at the age that you guys are in right now, you're at Erickson's stage of identity development, and where he is talking about figuring out who we are and accepting all of the parts of ourselves. And we're confused. We're confused by what they are. We don't know some of these things. And we'll go into more detail and discussion in that week about how we come to accept and figure out those things about ourselves. But I think the importance of this chapter and the chapters we read this week are, how do those early experiences affect that level of identity when we're older? And I think the Alaska Native community is really starting to understand and recognize that if we want culture to be at the forefront and to evolve with us as Alaska Native people, we need to make sure it's something that our children are exposed to and our children are accepting as part of themselves early on in their lives. And we know that historically that wasn't always able to be the case in the past generations because of what's happened with westernization and colonization and boarding schools being forced upon people and the way the language was taken away from everyone. So I think that more and more with programs that are developing throughout the state for immersion types of language programs for kids. I know up in Barrow we have Ukauchamuglua, and childcare is now being very culturally relevant care provided, and more people are trying to teach their children the language, and more people are really starting to accept and value culture. It's a shift. It's a shift, and this is the time. And these phases of life that we're talking about this week, this is the time where it's important. It makes an imprint to appreciate those things right now. The other types of things that are talked about in this chapter are, besides gender identity, are the role that parents play in that. So keeping that in mind in all the discussion we just had, what do you think about the role parents have in something like gender identity or cultural identity or, any of these?
Parents have a huge part in gender identity.
Yes.
My husband and I talked about it because we have a lot of kids, and we talk now a lot about Alaska and about the men in Alaska and the strongness and the hunting and just the whole culture of the real man is my view of what Alaskan men are like. And my husband said, I would never make it there. Most people that would see him would think he was gay. He's not. He's just kind of feminine. And so my sons, in turn, are not the hunting type. They're not the sports type. So it's huge. Nurture and nature. They grew up with a kind of guy that's a musician and plays classical music, and and they pick up on that.
Right.
My son grew up with a hunting father. He'd be totally different.
Yep.
So yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, and I think that's important for us to consider, that it really isn't only about the biology. It isn't only about who we are and our genetics. It really is the influence of our environment, of where we grow up, and the who is raising us makes a huge difference too. Chapter 6 in our text is talking about, so we move beyond preschool and now we're getting into childhood, when things really start clicking. And it's interesting because my son is now just turned 4, so he's still preschool aged, but he was having a lot of issues with behavioral types of issues at school in terms of the structure, compared to being at home with mom and, doing what he wants to do. And I was never the type of parent that was like, okay, this is nap time every day, and this is meal time every day, and this is what I wasn't like that. I would kind of go with the flow of what the kids were doing in terms of how we planned our days. But when you go into a preschool classroom, you know how it is. You got to be structured because you have 20 little kids running around. So that structure took him probably about 5 months now. It's been where he's been struggling with behavior. But then something happens cognitively, and things just click. And at that age where they could start to recognize and make sense of it, like, oh, if I listen and I get the rewards each day of I get my green light and I never have yellow or red, I get a lot better treatment at home from mom and dad. Things are a lot better for me when I'm following those rules. And that cognitive switch where it all clicks and makes sense it happens between the ages of 4 and 5 is when that starts to happen. So when we talk about it's like it's metacognition. They understand, and they're making those understanding about their memories, and they're recognizing and remembering, oh, well, if I do this, then this happens. If I do this, then this happens. I don't want that. So they start to change their behavior based on all of those cognitive things clicking for them. when you think about your own understanding of memory and you think about metacognition, your own understanding of your own memory and your understanding of the way you think about things, it's really reflection. It's metacognition, it's reflection. It's what we do when we talk, when you have a rough day and you call your best friend to vent. To talk about it, because talking about it and understanding your memories and understanding what you're thinking helps you get through it, right? It helps you make your way through it, make sense of all the things that happen that a lot of times you don't have control over. All of that starts to develop in middle childhood. In this chapter, it talks a lot about information processing and the way that we remember and the way that our brain processes all of this information. And all of that is really important to being successful academically. The chapter also talks about kids that have learning disabilities, where all of those things don't come to play and that academics are difficult to them as a result. So based on that, I did want to go through some discussion questions for Chapter 6 and see what you guys have in terms of your thoughts on some of these things. And the first question I have is about the theory of multiple intelligences, Gardner's theory. Have you ever heard of Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences before you read this, or is this the first time?
My first time.
Your first time?
I actually did with my college class that I took through UAS.
Good.
And I had to do a PowerPoint on it, so I did that. That's what I...
Do you think, based on the fact that you know a little bit about it, what do you think? Do you think it's real? Do you resonate with it? Do you think that it's accurate, or do you think everybody has the equal aptitude to do anything? Or do you think people do have certain things that they're better at, so the theory of multiple intelligence is true for you? What do you think?
I think that it could either have both, like they could fit in with this, or they could do a lot more things than what it says that they can do. Or it could go either way.
Yeah, and I think that that's the key with a lot of these theories, is that it can go either way, because there are some people that really believe, like, oh, well, I am really good at music and art and anything that has to do with sports or, you know, movement and kinesthetics and those kinds of things. Oh, I'm just not good at that. There's other people that approach these types of things with the understanding that I can learn anything, and I have the ability to do anything, and I'm not limited to only being good at certain things. So it really depends on your own personal opinion of it, and it's a theory that it resonates with some people, it doesn't resonate with others. If you had to put yourself in one of these intelligence, what would you think that you were the strongest at? What type of intelligence do you think you have personally? There's linguistic, so the communication and the ability to write and read and communicate your ideas. There's logical, mathematical, with, you know, spatial types of things, and mathematics. These are the people that are really good at thinking of the why, you know, the logic why, the why behind things. Musical and artistic types of intelligence. There's interpersonal, your ability to communicate with others. Intrapersonal, your ability to understand yourself. Naturalistic, more of the connection to the world around you, the outdoors, the nature. And then there's existential, the big picture, the vision, like the spiritual types of purpose of life types of of an intelligence that, you know, and you could probably think of people like this in your life that are more, you know, I know somebody that's just very spiritually inclined, and if I have questions about things like that, I always can turn to them because they just have an innate ability to understand and explain those concepts to me in a way that makes sense. And then there's other people that, you know, when it comes to, I need to get an Excel spreadsheet done and plug in formulas and figure out budget, I might not be the best person to do that, but I know I could turn to people that are better at that than me. So it makes sense it definitely has value, the theory. But I agree with Adrian. I don't think that you could just say, yeah, it's true. And I 100% solid say that I follow that people fall into these categories and that's it. It's not it's not black and white. It's gray.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. What about this is another big hot topic. Attention deficit disorder. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, ADD, ADHD. There's been a huge increase in diagnoses of ADHD and ADD in the past couple of decades. What do you think? Do you think that this is something that more and more people have it? Or is it more and more people are getting diagnosed because we know more about it? Or is it people are being misdiagnosed? Or is it that the pharmaceutical companies have all sorts of drugs that they're making for these things that they're trying to sell? I don't know. What do you think? Because it's a phenomenon. I mean, it's incredible how many people are taking medications for ADHD or ADD in comparison to 10, 15, 20 years ago. What do you think about this? I have some strong feelings about it, so I'm not going to say anything, but I'd like to know what you guys think.
Another problem with that is a big thing in college is students that don't have anything related to ADHD are taking it like to stay up late and then focus on it. And so I think a big part of it does have to go into the pharmaceutical companies where just lately they've been really sketchy in all sorts of medication. And then I think it has to do with some schools aren't really as trained to work with students that need different types of learning ways, or like how there's kinesthetic learners and visual learners, and they're not working towards those students.
It's too prescribed,
and
you're saying.
Playing to it.
Yeah. So
like technology.
Right. Technology, that's a good factor too that could be considered. It doesn't have to do with technology. And I like the point that you made about training and whether or not people are equipped in the schools to best serve students of different learning abilities. It is very prescribed. Education in America is prescribed. There isn't much room, and with the No Child Left Behind Act, it got even more prescriptive. There's not much room for teachers to even be creative or be individualized with the way that they teach students a lot of the time. Sad, but it's the reality. But I think those are really good points. I think pharmaceutical companies, huge point. Absolutely, they play a role in this. There's money. Money is influence in this.
I think there's that too, but I think there's also too many demands put on young kids. Whoops, I lost y'all's faces.
It's okay.
I think there's too many demands put on kids at a very young age. When we expect 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds to sit for extended hours and they want to get up and run around and just be kids, and we label them as ADD, go to the doctor and we say, little Johnny's in a classroom, he can't sit still, and the doctor says, well, he must be ADD.
Yeah, fix him.
Give him Adderall. Give him Ritalin.
Yep, you're right.
And that's really the No Child Left Behind Act, that we want kids to fit into a mold that they're not ready for.
And just this statistic from the book is pretty striking. 3 to 7% of all school-age children are diagnosed with ADHD. That's pretty significant. And that boys outnumber girls 4 to 1. And we all know, genetically, boys are more spirited. Boys are more active. And it goes back to what Brittany was saying about if the teachers don't have the flexibility or the training or the ability to work with different types of students and everything, and like Laura's saying, if there's so many demands on them being able to pass these tests and do these things in order for the schools to stay functional, it really makes it hard. It makes it really hard to help the students that don't fit that mold.
I think what's really hard is you take the, sorry, take it to y'all's faces, I think what's really hard is you take these little kids that are 3 years old, 4 years old, and you label them immediately. Little Susie has a behavioral issue. No, she's 3 years old. She wants to run. She wants to play. But now she's in a situation she's not allowed to. She has to sit.
Right.
She has to do story time. That's unrealistic goals for a child that young. I've homeschooled all my kids for pretty much that reason.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's part of the struggle, and I think that elementary school used to be a place where you could still be a kid, and more with the revisions and the structure and everything that's been going on, you can't anymore. You have to pass this exam, and you have to get certain scores on it, and you don't have time to. I remember, just fun things that we would do. We would study Mayan culture and turn our whole classroom into a Mayan temple and create it and feel like the play of that. That doesn't happen as much anymore. It's so prescriptive.
You know
it's
why?
not fun.
That doesn't happen because we're compared to other schools. So the funding is higher in the school system if you do better. So school is about taking tests and planning to take those tests, and it loses the focus from the child.
Exactly. And I think we can learn a lot from European countries like Norway and Switzerland and Sweden and Denmark and these places that they don't give homework. They pay their teachers very well. The role of a teacher is highly valued, and it's an aspired position. They don't talk like Americans do. If you can't do, then you teach. Anybody ever hear that saying? That saying makes me so mad. As if somebody that chooses to teach is incompetent of doing work. No. I get really mad when I hear that. But that's an American phrase. That's something that Americans came up with, as if teaching is this like second-hand alternative to other professions. We need to value our teachers. We need to value our children, and we need to make learning meet the needs of kids. They're not going to learn if they're not engaged in having fun learning. There's plenty of time in the professional world to sit around and have to do reports and presentations, and I just wish that there was more flexibility in our system in terms of education. So I think a lot of that is discussed in this chapter, and I want you to pay attention to that as you continue your readings and your assignments for the week. And that's why I like flexibility, and I've said this before. If you guys don't want to write a paper and you feel more comfortable talking about it, record yourself talking about the topic. If I want you to be able to not feel the need to constantly fit in a box, and a lot of what I'm seeing in your assignments is flexible. I don't want to give you a set way of doing everything. I want you guys to learn in the way that makes sense to you, and none of your assignments have been conformed. All of you are responding in different ways, and that's exactly what I expect to happen because you all learn differently. So far so good. Everybody's been on point in class, and I have been pleased with the assignments I've graded so far. I will get back to you all, like I said. I know we're on our last couple of minutes of the teleconference, but I'll definitely get back to you before the end of the day with some responses to the framework that you put together for your project so that you have some input when you start your interviews. If you do want to record your session with your elder, please let me know, and we will work out a time to set that up so that you can use this forum and you'll be able to see everybody. You can use the teleconference line if need be, and you can record the session on GoToMeeting and use if you're doing a distance type of a arrangement. If you're sitting with somebody face to face, you could set up your iPhone and make sure you record it. I would suggest recording the interview so you can go back and listen to it again when you're coming up with your presentation. It'll be really nice to be able to do that. If you don't record it, it's really hard to focus on somebody that you're talking to while also jotting down all your notes. So I would suggest doing that if you have the ability to do so. And if you need any help in the meantime, just like always, let me know. Any questions, comments, concerns before we wrap up?
Nope.
All right, great. Well, thank you all for your time, and I will talk to you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.